Why on earth did you suddenly decide you're going to risk it all and become a millionaire? What on earth possessed you?
Well, I think there's two or three things, isn't there?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Human After All. Today I am absolutely delighted to welcome Steve Dineen. He is one of the pioneers of digital learning. He founded Fuel, one of the UK's first e-learning companies, grew it into Europe's second largest bespoke digital learning provider, which serviced over 40 of the FTSE 100 before selling it to a large US organization. After that huge success, Steve saw even more purpose and founded Fuse Universal, that will be very common to a lot of you, a learning platform that is used by millions worldwide. He also founded FuseSchool, a not-for-profit initiative providing free, high-quality education to children globally. Steve is on a mission, simple, but it is radical, and that is to democratize learning and make education accessible to everyone, everywhere. His philosophy fuses technology with storytelling, empathy, and social purpose, challenging the idea that corporate learning and compassion are opposites. So, Steve, delighted to welcome you to the program. Let's kick off with the whole idea of AI with heart. So the world is racing to integrate AI into education, but very few leaders have lived both extremes, from hand building computer labs in rural Africa, which I know that you've done, to building AI powered platforms. So this conversation, I really want to uncover how we use technology to expand the opportunity, but without losing the human empathy. So before the companies, before the entrepreneurial quests that you've been on, who was Steve?
Well, first of all, thanks for that drum roll. I've never had one like it. It's up there with Knight's Tale and the person that introduced the knight inside it. So yeah, amazing. I'm going to save that for next time. I think for me, I think right from my first job, there's two passions that came within. I think within my first job, and that was a passion for technology, a geeky passion for technology, and a love for seeing people evolve through education. I didn't know that when I was a student. I didn't know that until actually I had my first job, and I didn't know that until I was in the job, and that wasn't what the job was about. But within that role, I evolved, I think, relatively quickly from being a kind of tech support person to a technical trainer. And I think on that technical trainer bit, that's the moment when it's like, oh my God, I love this. That's when that passion came through, and that combination of teaching people technology and being just geekily interested in learning about technology at speed. And at the same time, seeing what it's like to see, pardon the analogy, right? The pun, but seeing a flower grow. And I loved it when people came back and say, hey, you put me through that program, that 1 week or 6 week program, and now I've got my better job. And I think it was those things that planted the seed to think that's what I always want to do, right? And it's the intersection of those two things between, I think, helping people grow and the love of tech.
What was the tech? So presumably this is before learning management systems, or what was it, CD-ROMs, or what was it?
So it was, I mean, this is kind of going back, so I'm going to show my age here a little bit, right? But this was teaching systems like Novell, Cisco,
Right.
Microsoft NT. So at first there was, I guess, an interest. I kind of jumped into it first, right? Because actually it was, I saw that there was people who were similar age were earning three times as much money as I was. So I was like, okay, well, I need to get into that. So it was a financial motivation. But then as I started doing the role, I was like, oh my God, I actually love this too. I ended up, I think I passed like 100 exams on
Wow.
technology, became the most qualified person in Europe across the manufacturer qualifications. Yeah, I went a little bit over the OTT on it.
But so they were in a great job, doing really well, right? Why on earth did you suddenly decide you're going to risk it all and become a millionaire? What on earth possessed you? Or were you just, your brain was moving at such speed you didn't have any other choice but to work for yourself?
Well, I think there's two or three things, isn't there? I think there's one is my parents were entrepreneurs, so I think you're always influenced by that. So it wasn't abnormal, right? If you're born up in an entrepreneurial family, which I was, you don't have those risk barriers that maybe other people do. Who's maybe if your parents are always brought up working for someone else. And so I think that was a part. I think that someone said to me, oh, well, I think the second bit also, I realized in my first job, I just saw how people that were good, how they were maybe treated in a corporate environment. And knowing myself, and I've probably got some similar personality traits to you, right? But knowing myself, I knew that I'm not the person that's going to keep their mouth shut and be that kind of big company person. So I think having the awareness about yourself and knowing that even though I was doing really well in that company, that I've got too big. There was a moment actually in that company, right? And it's about right and wrong. And I think you've got the same thing here as I do, right? So I had a big belief in right and wrong, probably given to me by my mum. And there was a moment in that first company when I was a tech support pre-sales guy, and I was helping the salespeople sell more technical products, and I was a bridge between the tech team and the sales team. And there was this moment when Microsoft came in and were doing a big promotion day, or I can't remember which vendor it was. There was loads of questions the sales team couldn't answer. So I was like helping some, and then I was like bridging and passing the question to the tech teams, and the tech teams were doing it, and the sales team smashed their target. So when the vendor came in to reward the sales team with pizzas for everyone, I thought the right thing to do is to give pizzas to the tech team and share in that part. But there were some people in the sales team that were didn't think that was right. And so they were saying, "No, Steve, I mean, I was friends with them. No, Steve, you can't take that pizza. It's our pizza." I mean, it's a little thing, but for me, that's the wrong thing to do, right? The right thing to do is we share together, we won together, so we do it all together. So they took me to their manager and said, "Look, Steve's got a problem here, right? And he wants to take our pizza."
Wow.
And I said, and I just didn't back down. I said, no, the right thing to do is to bring it towards it. And then I wouldn't back down to him. So he took me to the vice president of sales. And again, I was like, no. And again, I wasn't backing down, right? I was like, the right thing to do is we need to share the right thing. They've helped. And he was like, so I want to. And then they took me to the vice president, who was the person that actually employs me, that sold his company, a guy called Rob Johnson, who was a great mentor to me in the years continued. And he listened and he goes, "Steve, there's 50 quid. Just go and buy some bloody pizza down the road." Right. But at the same time, right. And then the next day, I remember the managing director of the company, and this is actually Ingram Micro, right? It's a big company. The managing director of the company said to me walking past the foyer the next day, "Hey, Steve, fancy some pizza?" And and that's probably when I realized, I'm going to put my foot in it at some point. I'm going to upset the wrong person. And in a big company, right, that's not going to, I'm just the wrong fit, I
Yeah.
think, for that part. So I think at that moment, I probably made a choice that I'm going to have to find that thing that I'm going to do. I didn't know what it was at that
Yeah.
particular moment, but I definitely thought that this isn't my path.
So what was Fuel and how did you grow it?
So, because I guess I ended up with this wealth of knowledge in my head at the time, right, from all these different vendors, from Microsoft, Novartis, and Cisco, what was the problem at the time? I guess I was solving, because every business is about solving a problem. So,
Oh,
yeah, and you've got to find the problem that you think that you can solve that problem better than than everyone else. So the problem I saw at the time was, if you were, I don't know, a company like Canon or BT or Cable and Wireless, and you needed to learn all about these technologies, at the time, the only way you could learn about them was you had to go and book these generic courses from each one: 5 days with Microsoft, 20 days with Novell, 10 days with Cisco. But because all that knowledge existed in mine and my colleagues' heads, I could design a specific program for a company. Say, well, I can design a course that teaches how Canon or Xerox or Cable and Wireless, your world, connects into this disparate world of all these different manufacturers. So that was the first problem we saw, was the ability to create, more tailored, more personalized experiences for different audiences, sales audiences and tech audiences, using the knowledge that I'd learned that was sticking inside my head. So that was the problem we first solved. And there was and that's what we ran at. And me and a few people in the company said, let's go run at that. And that then the company we were working for at the time then actually offered us a retainer to keep us for a while. So they offered us a 10 days. When they heard we were leaving to set this company up, they came back and said, look, why don't you work with us? We'll pay you kind of 10 days a month. We took that, and that created the foundation to allow us to continue to do what we're doing before, but in a better paid way, and use the profits we were now getting from that to build our companies. That was the beginning of that, and we grew that then to. I think I had about 20 trainers working for me, dedicated to the books, teaching everything from CEOs of major tech companies through to, the frontline salespeople, engineers, and so forth in tailored programs. And yeah, really cool and learned a lot.
fantastic. And then you sold that.
Well, so we actually morphed it, right? So we evolved it. So I guess because, again, showing the age here, at the beginning, the birth of the internet, right? That I guess I was really into then, okay, how do we scale that, right? So the next problem I was trying to solve was, we have these amazing trainers, these amazing people, and people love what they do. But, to find these brilliant people, you couldn't scale it. So the problem I was then trying to solve is, how do you scale the great training knowledge that exists inside it? So we were looking at then, video animation and technology, right? So both technology to distribute and better ways to explain it. So we evolved the business just as kind of .com hit. And then because we had a technology part to it, literally we had every investor, throwing money at us to say, forget about that face-to-face multi-million pound training business you got. We're interested in the £100,000 of revenue you've got in this .com type thing. And they invested millions inside of that then to, I guess, evolve the first person. So we ended up transitioning the face-to-face business into what was at the time kind of a then became mainly an e-learning content creation company. And I think to be fair, yeah, it wasn't CDs, the really early stuff. And then when Flash 4 came out, that was when, oh my God, Flash 4, we can now visualize the ideas in a much easier, better way. And that was kind of the breakthrough technology that I think allowed us to really develop that first bit, the second business, which is Fuel.
And so then you jumped. Fuel, you left or you exited Fuel. How did that happen? And you ended up in Africa. I mean, can you explain how that happened?
Yeah, so we sold Fuse, so we sold Fuel, sorry. So, there's always a time, at a moment when, your partners and investors think it's a good time. An offer came in, and everyone decided actually that's good. It's a good time now to maybe, for me, I thought, look, let me end that part of the journey, because the company buying us was focused on compliance learning, and I thought, okay, that's not something I want to do for the rest of my life. So not only that anyway, right? So it allowed me to, to cash out, to make some money, to exit out. But as part of that, though, I signed an agreement that I wouldn't work in the known universe in the same industry, for a period of time. So it was pretty much adherence to that. And I think what had happened is I had got married in between to my wife, who was Indian from Bombay, and Mumbai now. And when I went to Bombay for the first time, I guess I saw poverty outside of Europe I hadn't seen before, which makes an impact on you, right? I saw children poverty. It really had an impact upon me. And at the time, I thought, okay, nothing I could do now, but that problem again stays inside your head, and you're thinking about, well, what can I do? So when I had that moment when I couldn't work, I'm thinking, okay, now's a perfect moment, right? So if I can throw myself at that problem and say, how can you have a little dent at that problem, right? What can you do that's going to make a little dent in the world to make that piece better? So it started actually. I got involved in a charity as a non-exec, kind of, where we started putting, yeah, kind of. And what I saw the problem was if you could teach people how to use technology, then you could teach them to learn anything. So the charity who was putting PCs into different schools across Africa, I then created a digital curriculum, like a typical kind of e-learning curriculum that took the knowledge for it. And we started rolling that out literally from hundreds of schools across Africa. And again, it was amazing that I got to travel from east to west to south, from Kenya to Ghana, to get to Ghana to Botswana, so pretty much the whole continent, right? And it was an amazing experience of things I've never seen, and wonderful people that you meet on the journey. And then I think to the point, right? Then I think there was a moment when I was having dinner in Senegal, or lunch, I think lunch at an event called E-Learning Africa, and the Tanzanian Africa education minister said to me, "Look, I've heard what you're doing. It's really cool, but it's a drop in the ocean. How do you solve the bigger problem, right?" And he was right, right? We're impacting thousands of kids, right? Not millions. And the problem he outlined was, he said, look, it would take we've got millions of kids in our country and our continent that don't have access to quality education. It would take a lifetime. We don't even have enough teachers, and it would take a lifetime to teach the teachers, or to find the teacher and train them to teach the kids, right? So how do you scale? How do you think bigger? And how do you solve the entire problem? So first of all, I was like, as you reflect upon it, and I remember chatting to the people working on FuseSchool at the time, like, he's right. What we're doing is drop in the ocean. The scale's much bigger. And that then became the framing question, then that drove FuseSchool, which then indirectly, I think, drove Fuse later on. Yeah, I think that's, well, maybe that's the answer to how I ended up in Africa, and ended up with that great question to go solve.
So Fuse School happened first, and then Fuse Universal happened after.
Yeah. So the first challenge I think was, okay, how do you provide, two or three challenges we had? How do you provide digital education to a much broader audience? And how do you make it interesting? Because, as there's similar backgrounds to us in terms of companies, that I never managed to get through one of my previous companies' e-learning courses. So we were creating these 1 hour e-learning courses, right? And next, and I never managed to get through it. So I thought, okay, I don't want to. And although we did that initially for the initial hundreds of schools, I thought that's not the answer. It can't be the answer, right? I've bored enough parents, and I've bored enough adults in the world. I can't go and bore a bunch of kids as well, right? So, it's never going to take off. So how do I create something that the kids want to use, that they want to engage in, that doesn't have to go through the school system, but they can choose by themselves to go access, right? And how do I create, and then, so how do I create the quality of it was the part. And the second thing is, how do I make it cost effective? Because the cost of building an e-learning course back when we first started, right, was a lot, right? It's tens of thousands of pounds for each course, right? So there's the that problem, and then there was the distribution problem. Those are the three big problems. The first part then was this: we solved the content problem by, it was one day actually, it was, I can't remember this guy's name, but the guy from Skillpill, he was in an office with me one day, right, and he showed me this animated video that he, and we were trying to work it out, right, couldn't work it out. I couldn't work out how you create content faster and more engaging, and he showed me this animated video of a CEO of a big company talking, and it was beautiful. The animation was beautiful, in sync with the audio, and I was like, God, that must have taken ages to work with the CEO to get him to do that. And he goes, no, we just took an audio stream, never met him, and we put a visualization on top. So, oh my God, that's the way, right? Because the old way we used to create e-learning courses, right, was you sit with the expert, you interviewed him, write on a piece of paper, and it's like a Hollywood production, the amount of steps and cycles. So, that was the kind of the trigger. Oh my God, if you could just get an audio recording of the best teacher explaining atoms or particles or algebra or something, right? Just get the best teacher in an audio clip. I don't need to go back and forth anymore, right? That's it. It's 15 minutes with the expert. And then I put a visual layer on top of it to make it easier to understand, make it more brain friendly. And I read a lot during that time out. I'd read a lot about everything I could consume in terms of brain science and how the memory learns, every book I could read. I mean, I literally was, it's just like I was consuming knowledge to pass those 100 exams. I was consuming knowledge in that time out of how the brain learns, and everything I could find that would influence me, a book, a magazine, a part towards it. So when we saw this, right, then it's okay, well, that's one breakthrough. And now let's think about how do you make it so that it's engaging, it's interesting. That's where storytelling came in, mnemonics and memory. How do you make it concise, succinct? And the mobile piece, the part I saw across Africa, right, was you don't have, everyone doesn't have access to a desktop, but even back then, everyone had access to mobile. So in my head, the mobile piece was key. So that allowed us to actually figure out, you could interview, go find the best. So the answer became, go find the best teacher you can find, and and that's part of what we did with FuseSchool. And a lot of them were already on YouTube, right? So you just went and asked them, would you want to be part of this journey? And they did. Pretty much everyone did, and we paid them for their for their time and doing towards it. Then we employed some animators that would then take each audio. They would then take that 10-minute clip down to like the 3-4 minutes that would happen, and then they'd use brain friendly friendly visualizations. We always called it kind of active imagery, so it wouldn't just be passive imagery on the screen. The visuals are helping the understanding and going deeper, rather than it's just kind of pretty stuff on the screen. So it's really super kind of like brain friendly towards it. And then we were figuring out, and this is the funny part, right? To figure out, God, but if we put it on the servers, put it on Amazon or something, right? It's going to cost us millions, right? And if we get to 10 million kids a year, it's going to cost us £2-3 million a year, to go doing it. And my exit was okay, but it wasn't like enough to kind of fund at that scale. And then it was really funny, right? We had the head of Google Africa was in our office one day. I'm not sure why. Really cool guy, and he goes to me, "Why don't you just put it on YouTube?" And at the time, right, we had some really smart people. They had this other guy working with me, Ed, right, and he was like probably the smartest person I've ever met with, right. And he was like double first class honours, self-studied at the bar, common law in 9 months, like, and he's insanely smart guy. And we both looked at each other, walked outside, and said, "No, we would have thought of that. We can't. How did you miss that, right? How did we miss that?" And that's what we did, right. And then so. Then that became distributions free. We've now got 1,000 videos inside it. We have had averaging 5-10 million kids a year that go through that content. I mean, what's amazingly beautiful, right, for me, is there were moments when my kids in London, because my part of the vision was I would love to be able to create something which the kids in posh schools would use, and the same the kids in developing countries would use, right? And so it's quality wise, you really are getting that equality part towards it. What was really cool, right? Because I can see on the stats, right? You've got this 5-10 million people in India, Africa, UK, everyone across the world using it. And since then, we've also localized it and translated it in multiple languages, audio streams and stuff as well. But then what was cool, right, was my kids coming back from school one day, in London, and say, Daddy, were they using your schools in our lesson, your videos in our lessons? And one of my kids came back and said, the teacher talked to me about you today, Dad. So, what's she say? She said, she's really inspired by what you're doing in FuseSchool, and it loves what you're doing, and it loves the videos and all the videos you do. So I said, well, how does that make you feel? He goes, are you proud of me? He goes, yeah, I am actually proud of you, Daddy. I said, oh my God, that's it, right? That's it in life, right? That's it in life. That's the moment when you do it. And then now that I've actually moved with the family to Portugal, and my kids were in the school, and they came back again this first week of school and said, Daddy, they're using the videos in the school. And you're like, oh God, I'm in a different country without asking. So yeah, again, that to me, that's been a great journey so far.
And so how did FuseSchool lead to Fuse Universal?
Well, I mean, first, obviously, I guess the problems we were solving for FuseSchool, right, which is how do you go beyond the kind of school course, right? How do you go beyond something which a lot of us don't, and I'm ADHD, right? So it's probably a big reason why I wasn't able to get through the course. And it's the recognition that, look, some people are fine with that, right? Some people are that type of profile where a logical, like if you're autistic and structured learning what you do next is absolutely perfect, right? But for an ADHD brain, it's like, oh my God, it's like going to the opera. If you don't like the opera, I can't get out of it, right? I'm locked in and my brain's going crazy. It's the worst thing I can imagine. So, I think the journey I was on at the time was trying to find stuff that was more interesting and engaging to a more global audience. I think you look at the corporate clients, and the same thing. You looked at it and said, well, we know we're in a world where engagement is a problem. People are not engaging with these courses; they're forced to go through it.
Yeah.
I think, the first generation of e-learning solved the distribution problem through the internet. As in, you could create a course, you can get that course to 100,000 people in weeks, right? And everyone's gone through it. That's amazing. But the engagement, the quality level was terrible, right? The majority of people.
And the change of behaviour. And I mean, nothing happened. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you can.
a little,
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of people saying it, pretending that it did happen, right? But realistically, what we were able to do was to distribute knowledge and understand, like distribute a book globally in a quicker period of time.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right, and the behavioural bit just wasn't there. So there's plenty enough big problems, right, to run at. And again, in my mind, right, I was quite clear that I thought that the part of the answer would be a platform. I thought the content piece is what we were doing with FuseSchool. That's part of the answer. So how do you get people to micro learning, bite-sized learning, visual-based learning, learn from audio, learn from video, rather than I'm only learning through one-dimensional text and images on a page. And I think the second part towards it was outside of that was how do you create the experience that is what we're choosing to use every day? So in my head, the answer was to make it content bit was fine. Platform wise, you looked at YouTube and Google and LinkedIn and said, well, those are the platforms we're choosing to engage in at the time, 10 years ago, that the main platforms. So logically would be, we've kind of got the answer now to what a useful online platform is that we choose to engage in. So at the time, I think I can see the answer, right? I can see the answer of how to create engagement through both content and technology, but I wasn't sure, and I'm sure you've been in the same boat, right? Do I want to throw myself into that life again? Knowing the roller coaster of a startup. And again, I remember the moment when I was chatting to somebody in a restaurant, and I explained to them how I saw the future of kind of learning technology, and they said, "Look, I think you're right." And at the time, you seem young enough to kind of go for it, and you've got towards it. Why don't you go for it? I was like, yeah, all right then. And then that was it. That was when it goes, and you're. And there's a little bit of a funny story actually. So at first, I was just about to. I was just about to start building the technology, and then Charles Jennings gave me a call, right? And he said, "Steve, look, and we'd known each other for quite some time." He said, "Look, I heard what you're going to do, because we were going to use this social network at the time, a product called Elg. It was a little bit like Yammer, and I was going to build a visual layer across towards it, like a social plus YouTube was kind of the big idea." And he said, "Look, I see what you're doing, but there's this spin out from Sun Microsystems of a product that seems similar to what you want to do. You should have a look at it, right? Because maybe you want to resell that rather than build it." So I thought, yeah, that saves me being another startup. Let's go for it. So I looked at it. I was like, actually, wow, this is kind of like in tune with what I've got. It was there were only two or three people that spun it out. They agreed to give us a European distribution rights towards it. I took on board then, so we became distributor for that, and I figured I could influence the roadmap, so without having to actually pay for it, which was great. And then there was another product I had I'd found, which actually I saw again. I went to Charles Jennings, right, as a performance support tool called Performance Support, called Support Point, which I was really, and I took to Charles and said, "Look, I think this is really good. Do you think this is good? And if so, why?" And then Charles actually explained to me, "This is amazing. It's kind of like, it was like the early version of ChatGPT, right? But and he explained to me why this would be amazing for the 70% type stuff." So I kind of had it, right? I had performance support and I had kind of the social learning pieces. To me, I didn't have the formal bit yet, but those are the two or the three elements to the stuff that I really believed in. So, we went to market, started selling them, got some really great clients, and then I had a phone call one night from the lady who had spun out the product from Sun Microsystems, saying, "Hey, what great news last night. We just sold to SAP, or SuccessFactors at the time, for $10 million." I say, "No, that's great. What's that mean for our relationship?" "I don't really care. I'm rich." She didn't say that, right? But in essence, right, behind the scenes, that's kind of right. So I was like, oh my God. So that was again another moment where I'm thinking, I've proven it. I know that there's enough now traction with customers to do it. Do we go to, what do we do? So that's again when we kind of made the decision of, now let's put my own money into actually kind of building out this technology, building out the dream, building out the vision towards it, but trying to keep those early clients on board, right? Because I had two or three clients that had bought it, but and then we had to kind of transition the conversation from, we don't have that technology anymore. Here's a video of what we're going to build. But they went for it, right? We had like Dixon's at the time, where Dixon's and Waitrose were the first two customers, and they bought it, I guess, on the back of the entrepreneurial vision, right? Those really early adopters, right? They're buying into the person more than they're buying into the technology. I think it's not mainstream yet, but the really, really, really early buyers. Yeah, that's how we then went down often the next path of the journey.
And Fuse Universal, how long has it been going now? It must be like 20 years, is it?
No, but it's well, about 10, 12 years. So, well, I said the platform's about, I think the platform's about, yeah, 11, 12 years. So obviously we started earlier when we were creating, in the early days, we were creating kind of, more traditional e-learning courses and other bits and pieces of lifestyle business. And then we transitioned to commit to, I think, to Fuse about a dozen years ago. And then it's been a roller coaster since, as you can appreciate. Yeah.
Wonderful world of learning technologies, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about AI now.
Hmm.
So you've lived through, as I have, I mean, with a similar sort of age, learning tech has changed absolutely massively. What feels different about the AI transition, the AI revolution?
Well, I think if you and I lived through a few moments, right, there are poignant moments over the last, 20, 25 years, right? You go, okay, this is a change moment. The internet, right, it was once you could start communicating and sharing information apart, that was, oh my God, this is a new tool. We need to harness, like Flash Forward was, right? Flash Forward was a moment because we could start to visualize ways and get the ideas out of my head in a visual format that we couldn't before. The internet became, okay, now I can distribute those ideas. I can distribute communication to a mass audience in a way. I think the next, and then I think mobile and social media, those two things were similar times. But the social media piece, I think, was another big thing of saying, okay, well, I can now take the ideas from not just top down, but ground up ideas and share that across all ways. So that was a massive moment. Obviously, mobile was great. I remember once in a cab on a mobile, right? And this cab driver, he asked me, I wonder who's opening that pub. Instead of that moving, I just did a search on my mobile for the first time, instead of who's opening the pub. And it was like Gordon Ramsay. I said, oh, Gordon Ramsay opening it. Oh my God, how do you know that? And then I wonder where it's opening. I wonder when it's opening. And then I did another little search in July the 15th. I said, oh, it's in July the 15th. Do you know everything? And, but and it was interesting. And that moment was, oh my God, if I've got access to a mobile phone and the internet, right? Wow, I've got access to it changes like how you see learning and knowledge. So that was a moment. And AI, I think, is the most recent version of that, right? So it's probably the biggest one in 10 years. And I think for you and I that share a lot of passions, what we believe learning to be, it's maybe the next enabler of that accelerator towards our visions, right? And I think I think for both of us, that the unsolved part up until now is the adaptability and the personalization of learning technologies. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that AI is. I think when we get really excited, I think that's the bit that you and I probably get really excited about because we're thinking that's the problem it solves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so the question I have to ask is, how do you think AI will solve that personalization problem? Like, or what impact do you think AI will have on education broadly, specifically?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's still just a tool, right? So it needs people like you and me and others to figure out how do we use the tool and harness it for the problem we're trying to solve versus marketing people and other people that have been looking to solve their problems. So I think you still need the experts. Learning science is still relevant towards it, right? I think if you've got that learning science and you've got that pedigree, that background that we both do, then it's an amazing tool, right? To then to start to solve that next problem. And if I look, specifically now at adaptability, personalization, if I look at the problem statement we've got is, if take take the individual nature of people. So neurodiversity is a great thing, right? If you're ADHD, I prefer to learn differently than if I'm autistic. So there's no doubt upon that. And I think for me, that's why I created FuseSchool, right? I probably was creating content for me and my children. I was creating bite-sized videos, bite-sized micro learning videos, because that's probably the method I prefer to learn in. I think in my time, I've realized not everybody's like me. So, other people don't want to learn in that method, right? And there's an ex-trainer, stand-up trainer, you recognize we all learn differently. So I think there's a whole individual preferences. There are things around what's a better way to explain something to you or to me. That each of three kids, I mean, okay, my kids all love anime, so maybe the best explanation is, or to engagement is to use an anime example inside that, right? There are different, and even as a good trainer, right? You would have your go-to explanation when you stand in front of a classroom. If that doesn't work, you've got a second or a third one. Ideally, if you understand the individual, you can then really tune in to that individual. So when I look at AI, I think the problem we've had before is you had to create all the different methods and techniques and mediums multiple times in order to actually
Yeah.
allow people to have choice to learn in the way they work. I think what AI allows us to do is it solves that problem, right? It allows us to create content once and then reuse that intelligent content to then automatically reform itself in a fluid way, like a river around the individual. and around the, each individual rock that's individual, right? To personalize it to yourself. So I think we're still relatively early in that journey, but I think we're already quite far apart, right? Quite far down the road. The ability that some people want to learn through conversation, some people want to learn through a learning conversation like an AI conversation. Some might want to learn through a video, some might want to read through, just give me the steps and the tasks I need to do. So I think now what we've got is the ability to go back to, let's remember all those different ways that people want to learn, and how do we use the technology to reform content and reform ways to learn that suit each individual.
And in the market, I mean, we both have conversations with, large corporates and, kind of international organizations. How do you think the whole AI transition is landing in terms of like what don't people understand about, AI and utilizing AI in education?
Look, obviously, well, I'm in kind of corporate education mainly, right? Apart from my kids, where then FuseSchool. But if I take the corporate education part, I think it's dramatically different this year to last year. I mean, dramatically different, right? So I think last year there were still people that were resistant towards it. The can't who's moving my cheese type side, right? And and maybe and even scared to trial things. I think that seems to have gone, right. I think definitely at the senior leadership level, I think it's hard to find a senior leader that isn't moving their cheese anymore, or isn't actually moving to new areas. I think they're all trying to figure out, okay, how do we go with this? How do we run at speed? How do we scale? I think a lot of people have done pilots, a lot of people using bits of ChatGPT and Copilot to do little pieces here and there. And the big question is, okay, how do I scale this now? And I think this is the moment I think we're in right now. So I think the great thing is that, and if I look in our customer base, you can't see. I mean, what I love is our most forward-thinking clients are leading the AI conversation in their businesses. A couple of clients I was on the other day who were doing a webinar with Hilton Levy. They said, look, we love it. Then actually we're the leading companies, the first to adopt a global AI technology across every company towards it. So I think there's that opportunity, right? I think the L&D leaders that are still scared of few. I think their fear now is more about, do they get left behind, and people choose to use those other tools and
Yeah.
not them, and their relevance becomes diminished. So I think there's two halves towards this, and depending on which part of the bridge you're on.
Yeah, I think that point is really interesting that people will find the best way of learning, and if that doesn't happen to be within the corporate, they'll find it anyway.
Well, even if it's wrong, right? I think that's the opportunity for us. I think as L&D practitioners, right? Because I think it's like, the other day I was learning. Well, when I was taking my going to Portugal and taking my cats, and I took a picture in ChatGPT of the cat carrier that I've got to say, is this going to be okay on this airline? It goes, yeah, you're great. It colors this standard, and so forth. You get to the airport and go, no, that's not valid for this thing. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my cats. My family's going crazy. I had to literally run a Mission Impossible activity, right? With a black taxi, dive into a local firm to get towards it before the plane gets off, and it was all fine, right? So there's a lot of misinformation. I mean, a lot of because you don't know where it's going to go and find the source from, right? So an answer from it, you're not guaranteed to get to the source, and you're not guaranteed every learner is going to go and check the source that ChatGPT or Gemini is getting it from, right? So I think people look, you look at 90% of people and companies are using it every day. But the same bit, just as we used to get the wrong information from asking the person next to us, we're now getting a lot of wrong information from these type of things towards it, right? So I think the opportunity is to provide quality, right? To be able to say, well, how do we do it on your information, your knowledge, and your way of doing things, and provide that level of value that learning science and your learning organization can provide on top of that. Yeah, versus the risk of what happens when you do I cut the red wire or the blue wire, and oh my God, thermonuclear war.
So, in terms of the way AI works, it is more of a kind of personalized or personal relationship. You're having a conversation with, an AI. How do you think that affects social learning? I know that you've always been a big proponent of social learning. Do you think AI will affect social learning in a, negative way, or do you think? I mean, what's your thought? Social learning versus AI
I, th- I
tech?
think it's Yeah, I think it's just another way, right? So I think there's two bits. One is the AI is only informed by the knowledge it puts into, right? So you've still got to figure out, and I do think one of the evolving roles of the L&D practitioner is, how do I go and find that amazing knowledge and get it into bite-sized videos, social learning things that fit towards that. So I think you still got to, it's human knowledge that feeds the AI, right? The AI is not learning about your new product or your best way to explain that new product towards it. The human part towards it is absolutely key, and the ability to find that great social knowledge, if you like, is absolutely key towards it. I think on the conversational bit, I think it's really interesting, right? And I don't think there's a kind of a one fit answer for everything. Talking to an AI, some countries and some cultures, I mean, they have said, look, like some South Americans are saying to me the other day, uh, when you're told to have a coaching conversation, it's because you've done something wrong. But so therefore you don't really have coaching conversations in that, say, in that culture. Versus if you had the opposite, and you wouldn't ask for one either, right? Because it also sounds like you putting your hands up because you don't know something. Versus having a conversation with an AI, right, would be seen as something they would do versus they wouldn't do in that particular culture. So I think you've, and I think sometimes people are saying, well, there's things that I can say to an AI that I can't say to a human. So there's different types of conversations, and at the same time, there are things. I mean, it's not to take away. I think the conversations with AI changes the conversation we have with humans. You still need that, and again, to the point, you don't want your kids or even maybe adults having those real social, like you've seen people that have killed themselves, right, by having the wrong type of conversation with AI. And the AI shouldn't be doing that, right? We really, really, really dangerous. And we all need to kind of figure out how we protect the world from that side of things. At the same bit, right? If I on the plus side, of the more kind of black and white stuff, right? If I want to know how to fix something or to work something, right, to have a conversation to help me think through a problem, to help me think through things, to help me learn things towards it, to personalize. I mean, imagine. I mean, again, for you and I, especially, I think when we think upon K-12 education and that part towards it, the ability to build AI tutors completely to personalize the learning for the individual, to learn about the kid, to learn about their interests, to learn about um, their way of learning, their learning age, their neurodiversity, their language, and to tune in towards that, and then to create something where they go, "Oh my God, I do understand it." A little bit like our YouTube channel earlier on, right? What was great about the YouTube channel is people go, "Oh my God, it's not me, it's the teacher. The
Yeah.
teacher's been explaining it in a way I haven't understood, and now I get it in 5 minutes." So to me, this is another way where you're just taking that upper level, and you're helping more people go, "Oh my God, I get it, right? I get it." And the AI is finding the way, right, to
Yeah.
be a great personal tutor. Look, a great tutor is going to find a way for the kid to understand,
Yeah.
but that's expensive, right? And personal tutoring isn't something that's available. So I think that's where I look at this and go, well, as you were saying, the ability to have a completely personalized experience where you're being tutored and it's helping you based upon you and where you are. I think that's beautiful.
It's such an exciting time in learning tech, I think. So moving on to kind of like your leadership style, and you're known for being, a kind of a new age leader, in so much that you kind of ban after hours emails and you really do protect work life balance. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. That was the one question. I thought that was the one question I thought. I think I've had to learn. I mean, to be fair, other people in the company did that rather than myself, right? I've had to learn which people you can and should talk to outside of hours of work, right? So for me, that's been a journey of discovery. Like, as an ADHD person, you have an idea and you think everyone's interested in that idea there and then,
Yeah.
right? So that's not a and every ADHD person is probably like that. The good news is I attract people like me to the company, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
yeah.
attract customers like me to the company. So the easiest people that come in that feel, but the last thing you want is a company full of ADHD people, right? Because you're never getting anything done. Billion
Yeah.
ideas, but they won't
So
get done on the other side.
so let's talk about, then flip it on the other. How about burnout then? As an ADHD person, have you ever had burnout? And has that been a thing? I mean, you know,
It's an interesting question, right? I don't think ADHD people tend to burn out. I think they tend to burn out others. So
it's
I
worn me
think.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more about learning, and for example, there's, one of the guys that works with me, he got burnt out, right? To be fair, not so much inside Fuse. I think he went to his next company, he really got burnt out. And I think, what he's now come back and working 3 days a week and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and the other time he's like, he's now has that work-life balance. I can now completely respect that, right?
You know what? We're going to move on from burnout. What I really want to know is,
Okay.
when you picture learning from 10 years from now, humans and AI are kind of fully intertwined. What does that vision look like? And what do you hope we don't lose?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I think the things that will get stronger is the appreciation of the social connection, right? I,
Mm.
I think I think we'll appreciate that more, and recognize that. How do you make sure you do that and strengthen that? Like someone I was meeting yesterday actually in Portugal, and she kind of her life coaching is going for walks, in the hills with a bunch of other female leaders, and you think, and that's just without devices, you think that's absolutely perfect, right? I think there's no doubt that technology and AI will understand us, we'll be able to take content, we'll be able to modify and morph that experience, particularly to every individual. So I think the knowledge understanding piece, right? I think technology does that. That does that, right? I think the person who's standing up explaining stuff, right? I think that part goes, but the person who stands behind you and it helps you and guides you, I think increases. So I think the social bits and the emotional bits, right, I think become amplified up. Go back to an experiment I did with FuseSchool like 5, 6, 7 years ago. We wanted to flip the classroom, right, to see what it would look like to learn from technology. So I bought like 200 Chinese mobile phones. We preloaded them. This is in South Africa. We preloaded them with all the maths content. And the trainer we had, she rewrote the classroom to say the classroom's just about a little bit like the hole in the wall experiment. Here's a bunch of exercises. The answer to the exercises work in groups. And the answer to the exercise and all the knowledge you need is on the phones. So the knowledge you need is on the phones, not the trainer,
Yeah.
not the teacher anymore. The kids then, the pass mark increased exponentially. 80%, 95% of the feedback from the kids was this is an amazing way to learn. I'm now learning much faster. But the teacher's job changed dramatically. She was now saying, I'm now able to reach 5 times more students than was before.
Yeah.
Beforehand, I'm delivering this knowledge, right? And in a uniform, one-dimensional way across the whole audience, and I can't personalize it, and I can't touch as many people. Now we got this method, which the teacher is now, I'm now socially connecting and helping. You got a bit stuck? Let me help and guide you, right? Let me put an idea outside here. So I think to me, that was the beginning of what this looks like in the future and the role of the teacher and the human and the trainer, which is being a little bit like your Tesla, right? If you're driving a car and you've got to be the back pilot, but you're allowing it to do a lot of the harder work for you. And I think that's where we get towards it, right? I think the understanding of knowledge comes from the technology. I think it's supporting you all the way through this, the 5 moments of need or the 70-20-10. But I think the trainer's role absolutely changes and morphs into a supporting part and helping guidance towards it and be able to touch more people
So
yeah.
it sounds like your vision of the future, combined with AI, is
Yeah, look, I mean, again, I think the first thing is just allowing to solve problems we weren't able to solve before, right? I think if I think to every child and every adult, right, the the biggest challenge is, I think as educators, how do we create an experience that works for you? And we've had to create one experience that works for everyone, which
yeah,
means by majority, right, you're failing the majority of people because we're not all the same. Me going through even though I sold e-learning school courses, I couldn't get through it myself. That's not my way of doing it, right? I mean, put me in a classroom, it's the worst thing for the classroom, right? I mean, I learn fast and I disrupt faster. So it's not good for the teacher and it's not good for the students, right? It's not good for anyone. But a school system or a corporate education system is saying we're going to treat you all the same. We're going to create one way of learning, which is a book-based learning course, and the way you go. I mean, our ability now to move beyond that and to use technology in an affordable way to modify the learning experience and to learn about the individual, to store that information about the individual, saying, look, I know you, Juliette, right? I know you're a rebel with the pictures you have behind it, the same as my wife, maybe the picture behind mine, right? I know your personality. I know what you know, what you don't know. I know what your passions are. I know the best way to explain things to you. I think the ability to learn about you, the individual, and then to modify all these amazing resources I've got to either find the resource or to modify it in tune with how it's going to help you in that moment of either foundational understanding or specifically solving a problem, when you're back in the workplace. That to me is now what you and I are running at a million miles an hour trying to solve, right?
yeah, that is the goal. That is the goal, and I love
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's super exciting. So, final question, right? If future Steve looked back at today, what would you want him to say about how you use technology?
Well, first of all, I say breathe, and make sure you get time to think, reflect, and and spend time with the family, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a prioritization, right? I think there's so many problems that we can no, so many problems that we've parked, and that's what technology does, right? You have a bunch of problems you see in the world, in our world, in education, and you park a lot of those conversations, right? Because the technology is not there to solve those problems. Technology comes along, and then you go, "Oh my God, I can solve that problem now." And the question now is, what's the right priority order to solve those in? What has the biggest value, the biggest impact for the audience that we care about and we're passionate about? And how do we choose the right priority and not get maybe distracted by something that looks interesting but maybe has a tiny audience, a tiny audience you're going to solve. I think there is a radical opportunity here to support so many more people, individuals
Yeah.
and companies,
Mm.
I think, to solve problems that they haven't even thought they could solve. And I think the priority, we just got to now figure out how do we rank those 1, 2, 3, 4 to make sure we're getting the priority right.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is it's very much because it's a bleeding edge new technology. It is very very new, and when I speak to people about what we're trying to do, with the AI, one of the things I find is that it's because it's brand new. People just don't necessarily know what it is or what the potential of it can be. So I think yeah, interesting times. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's probably where we're at, right? I think even for us internally, we are running so fast. I mean, literally, I mean, we're releasing stuff, and sometimes even I'm seeing stuff that we're releasing on a webinar release and going, I didn't know we could do that. So I think we've got to figure out how do we take everybody on the journey with us. So how do we take the people in our company? How do we take our partners, our ecosystem, our customers? So there's a lot of I think education on this, right? And funny enough, right? Yeah, some of that's on AI, but a lot of that's going to be on in conversations where you're meeting people and helping them to understand it. And at the same time, I do think the AI is going to help us with that part as well. But I think the big thing I think yeah is we've got to bring people on the journey and meet them to help them understand it, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
And that just the speed it's running it too, right? So yeah.
Well, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time. As always, like super energetic, and I'm sure we will speak again. But thank you very much for your time,
No,
and
no, no, it was
speaking soon.
for me to says on you and a really